I'm here today with Micheal Wheeler. He's one of our top cloud developers that we have in our group of companies. And today we're going to be exploring a couple of FAQs that we get from our different clients around developing for cloud, designing and architecting for cloud, but also how it is to work in a team that's working on really innovative new technology, but needing to solve really big real world problems. Welcome, Micheal.
Thank you.
So our very first question is, how long have you been working at Nebula, Micheal, and how long have you been working with the different cloud development, cloud native technologies?
Yeah, so I've been working at Nebula for about 4 years now, and this is the first job that I've had, and we dove straight into cloud development. So I've been working with cloud tech for 4 years, right out of university, which was amazing.
Amazing. Take us through where you got started, how you got kicked off. You were working, you were studying, and then this is, as you mentioned, your first job. Take me through that introduction that you had into developing in cloud native technologies.
Sure, yeah. So it's first job straight out of university, and I think the university I went to gave me a lot of really good tools to get into this. Like, we worked with the same tech stacks, things like that, but the only unfamiliarity was, of course, the cloud, which was like a really good introduction, because I learned all these like great practices that Microsoft like recommends and all these things, without needing to work with a baggage of like some other clients, like huge like deployment processes and things like that, that we just had like built in, and all the devs could do and things like that. So
referring there to Azure DevOps and having a CI/CD environment.
Absolutely, yeah. So like coming straight out of university, like we didn't deploy any code. We didn't. It was
on your laptop.
Exactly. You like emailed a zip file to the professor, and then coming straight in here, where you commit your code to like a repo, like a Git repo, and then having everything built for you automatically, and then everything like published for you automatically. It's like magic, right?
Amazing.
But then also still working with the familiar like tech stack with .NET, all those kinds of things. I think it was a great, amazing like learning curve, but also still comfortable enough for me to like move into the environment.
Right.
Yeah.
And you said now it's about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So trying to put yourself into that new Micheal shoes, you just stepped in here. What are some of the important things that needed to be in place into the team you were coming into to get into and get up to speed with cloud tech, given that you hadn't done that at uni?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing was having a mentor, like indispensable, having a person that you can like communicate with when you don't understand, someone you can go to like whenever, someone who's open door, all that kind of thing. Like you can ask them the questions that you don't understand. And there's a lot that I didn't understand, and I learned so much from the team that I worked with. And the team was such a close-knit group. I could have gone to anyone and asked them questions and things like that. And we did a whole bunch of things like peer coding, peer testing, peer DevOps even. Like we didn't know how a pipeline was working, or I was struggling with a pipeline. Just sit with a person, and then you can like get that out into you just work with them to fix the issue, to understand like fundamentally what's going on.
And there's a lot of debate in industry about this peer coding, and probably a little bit difficult in the current times, but talk us through that, maybe put us into one of those sessions that the team or yourself were doing peer coding with your mentor.
Yeah, I think peer coding is like indispensable. I think as a teaching mechanism, it's so useful, because not only does the person who's the junior who's learning learn something new, but the person who's teaching also can learn something new, because they might have an understanding of the implementation or whatever that they're doing, but then them actually needing to explain it to someone new can give them better insights, or like a more fundamental understanding of it, which is great.
Doing the research in the session, and testing it out, and just having that soundboard to bounce it off on.
Absolutely,
is great.
Very and then cool. Also, like it gives them practice on like filtering down what's the most important part of the concept that they're trying to teach. So I think
that's interesting. Actually, you're right.
And you might say that peer testing, there's 2 people in a room, you're using twice the amount of time, like man hours, to do the same job.
Right.
But I think that, sure, there is that kind of cost to it, but at the end of that session, you have 2 people who have better understanding of everything, rather than like one person knowing how to do it all the time.
Eliminating those silos of knowledge, which
Absolutely.
you pay for years to come, right?
Definitely, yeah.
And then coming back to the technology itself, in your having the inside information in your first couple of projects, it was very Microsoft Azure focused. Of course, on the back end, still full Microsoft technology, C#, etc. In one of your later projects, the cloud environment changed. Your approach was the same, the philosophy the same, back end tech stack the same, but deployed onto AWS. Now you're back on Azure again. Reflect on some of the differences there. What was that like? What was that learning curve like, having to deal with 2 different clouds?
Sure, yeah. So, like you said, the tech stack was the same. The process that we followed to do the development was the same.
Right.
The Azure DevOps practices, everything was the same.
Right.
Just the cloud environment was different, and it was a massive learning curve.
Right.
I can't explain to you how different Azure and AWS are.
Amazing.
Just the base understanding, or the base
maybe expectation that you have of what's in place and how it works.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's how the tech was designed.
Okay.
It was just completely different mindsets, right?
So to add into that, to put into perspective, we're working on cloud native development. We're not on infrastructure. We're not building on VMs. We're building in native PaaS services in Azure and AWS. And I guess the approach, is that right? The approach that each cloud provider take to it, a Microsoft versus an Amazon, approached PaaS very, very differently.
Absolutely, yeah. So the approach is very, very different. So with Azure, the approach is more platform as a service, software as a service, things like that. You provision this thing and then you use that to accomplish your job. Whereas AWS's approach is more networking and like VM focused. Right. You deploy a machine and then you deploy your code to the machine. You need to do all the like intricate networking with that. Right. So I'm not really a networking guy.
Right.
I have a little bit of experience with that kind of stuff.
Right.
But having to set up this huge cloud environment would be like 2 clicks in Azure. Right. Whereas AWS, you need to do every single setting, every single it was quite an undertaking, very, very large learning curve.
And then going back into Azure, where you're doing most of your product development, and now being on the product development team, is that an easy switch to go back? And how has that technology, even in Azure, how has it come along over the 4 years?
Yeah, I think the switch was like coming back home, right?
Coming back to mom's cooking.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a lot easier to switch back to. I didn't forget anything. There's no like, it's like riding a bicycle.
Yeah.
So that wasn't difficult to do. It was, and also the growth, the learnings that I took from AWS are important because I understand a little bit more about like provider like networking and things like that. Right. So there are things that clients might want that are like that, but most of the time Azure just has something out of the box.
They got it under control. Yeah. We'll leave that with, for context of the viewers, we'll leave that with Wim, who's our cloud solution architect. We'll leave that with him and his team to go and unpack all the networking needed for that.
Yeah. Okay.
And how did you keep yourself and your team kind of up to speed with what technologies to use, which PaaS services? I think you guys were one of the first in the company to start implementing durable functions. When 4 years ago, when we started that first big project, that didn't exist. That way of working didn't exist. How do you keep up to date, and how do you explore these things?
Yeah, so I think it's whenever you see a new service from Microsoft sends you an email, something like that, you say, oh, this is pretty cool, keep it in the back of your mind. Right. And then when you see a new problem that you have to solve, you can always go back to that one new solution, that new service, and say, hey, maybe this is the right solution for this. Maybe this can like solve this exact problem that we have.
Right.
And I think that's one of the strengths of working with my team is that we're always willing to try something new, always willing to like go over that edge, go like, even if it
go push it a bit.
Exactly. Even if it doesn't work out. I think most recently we tried to use stream analytics to solve one of our problems with stack ties.
Right.
And it just wasn't working out. It was I'd worked with it before and it solved that problem perfectly, but this time around it was a similar problem, but it just didn't have the power that we needed. We didn't have enough control over it. Okay. So we did a bit of backpedaling,
Okay.
We wasted a week, but we learned
rather 1 week now and take that back pedal than kind of, I guess, be open to the idea that we could have said, well, this is probably not the right technology, so let's backpedal for 1 week and go forward to something else, then I guess stubbornly going down the wrong path. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's working with that stream analytics, we felt pain doing the development, and I could just see us feeling a lot of pain when we needed to fix it. Right. So we made a decision as a team.
For sure.
Try a different technology, and that's where we use durable functions.
Okay. And that's how that actually came about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And actually, kind of along that line, and you mentioned the POCs as well. We do a lot of hackathons, POCs, especially over the December period where maybe some of the guys are not going on leave. They normally take on bigger POCs when we looked at Flutter or when we looked at React Native and some of the other technologies, front-end frameworks. Earlier we also chatted about some of the principles that we use in our decision making. We want to use cloud native, we want to have API first, microservices based approach. When you're looking at things like stream analytics, durable functions, the stuff in AWS, are you always keeping those principles in mind, and how does that kind of play out?
Yeah, definitely. Like I think like having those base principles of automated deployment, all those kinds of things, unit testing, and now also infrastructure as code is key. But having those base principles are great, and then you can just build upon them. Right. So, and then when you're trying out new technologies, you don't change those. You keep them.
You keep those static, I'm going to say, or in your mind. And when we're looking at all these different technologies, if they fit into that, great. Then we'll kind of explore it instead of just taking the bleeding edge thing that is impossible to support, actually.
Yeah, exactly. So if we find a new technology that's great, that's like works really, really well, but it doesn't have like the tech support, or if you don't see anything on Stack Overflow. Right.
Therefore, not a big community using this technology.
Right? Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Like you need that community backup to keep you on track a lot of the time, and also if it doesn't work with our workflow, if it's more painful to work with this technology than what we have already, then there's no real point to it.
Then what are we doing now? Yeah. And you've spent some time shifting gears a bit. You've spent some time in a fairly structured, I'm going to call it, corporate environment at a professional service firm, developing for them and implementing, an entirely new integration platform. Talk through some of the experience there, because many of our viewers might be in that similar environment. Talk through that experience and how did you maintain your innovative edge in an environment like that?
So I think one of the big things about that was how much corporate roadblocks almost. There's a lot of paperwork, a lot of you need access to this. Right. Then you need to talk to 6 people and get 6 signatures, and it takes a week to do that. That's difficult to deal with, especially when you need to do your job. Right. It's
pressures, deadlines, also they don't change.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So having to run around and deal with that is not it's not fun. Right. But I think being in that environment also makes it taught me how good we actually have it here. Like I can go and access a database if I need to, or I can diagnose something easily without needing to jump through hoops and all that kind of stuff. So I think, there's a lot of lessons I've learned, and then also grass is greener, right?
For sure, always like that, right? But I think even, reflecting on that and maybe adding some more context is, you went there, it was part of an S4 migration, focused heavily on the integration side of it, and the way that it was implemented, some of the technologies, SSIS packages, moving a lot of data around to make the integration possible through normal pub/sub. This exists at many of our customers and most likely some of our viewers. But you still managed to, through that process, design a really modern cloud-based integration platform, and that's obviously the AWS example that we used. How did you manage to piece that together, even in an environment like that? And obviously, looking back now, it was successful, right? We did it, we implemented it. You were obviously a massive part of that. Talk me through just how you saw that. How did you approach that? Because I think that's very relevant to some of the viewers out there.
Yeah, so I was brought on midway through the project. It was not going well. So they needed some help. So I volunteered to help out. And they were doing, like you said, SSI style. It's high flows with S4HANA, with SAP Cloud, which is brand new technology and things like that. And I noticed that all the tech stack that they were using for their application development was .NET Framework. So it's all like .NET style websites, things like that, SQL servers. So they assumed that because they were used to working with SQL servers for data, to fetch their data, they assumed that using some sort of ETL kind of style system would be perfect for them. They load the data. The issue was that the data load was so much, it was going to cost them like thousands and thousands of rands a month just in data transfer fees. So so they built this entire complex system to do delta migration, so only fetching the data that's changed and things like that. And just from my experience with working with APIs with our other client, we solved a similar situation. We solved a similar problem with just RESTful APIs. And they're dead simple. They fetch the data that they need, and that's it. So instead of relying on this big complicated system that was prone to failure and all that, I suggested that they move to a system where the clients can fetch the data that they need instead of pushing all the data into their downstream systems and doing that. So and they went about designing it, collaborating with the application teams, the integration team, obviously the S4 team, coming up with a really good design, implementing that, of course, with your team. And some of the feedback that's come from that is it's much more stable. They get almost no queries coming through from different systems that it's kind of going down or they're missing data. So now they're able to focus on new integrations and bringing on new things onto the platform. It's a really amazing story that in a year and a half you can go from where you are now in a massive environment. It's not a small startup environment, it's a big environment, into a whole new way of working just by focusing on a really solid integration strategy. Any reflections or things that you look back on now, into that environment? Yeah, I think I think what we did there was very, very successful. I think we got the right tech stack, we got the right technology. We did exactly what the client needed, but it was also very minimal in terms of how much of the data manipulation we were doing and things like that. So I think that helps a lot because again, the clients can then get the data that they need and then manipulate it in the way that they need to manipulate it instead of having some complicated system beforehand fixing all the data. That's it. I think there's a couple of things we could have done a bit better. Always. Absolutely. I think also just the amount of data that there was and the way that the data was structured from S4HANA, very, very complicated. It's not just an object with a list of fields, it's objects within objects, and then you need to join the data and things like that. We just used .NET and SQL and things like that. Sorry, not SQL, .NET and Link.
Okay.
To do that kind of data manipulation. But yeah, there might have been better ways of doing that, a little bit less memory intensive, but I think for the experience that we had as devs at that time and
the outcome is still
I
great.
think, I think it's perfectly functional.
For sure.
Yeah.
And we're going to go down two different paths now. One, working and integrating with a big technology company like a Microsoft, which you've got some experience in, but then also working with other teams and companies who might be on slightly older tech stacks and are needing to modernize. So let's go down that first path. On StackTiles now, you're working with heavily integrated solutions into Microsoft and the marketplace. Talk us through being on the outside, integrating into kind of a big company like that. What are some of the pros and some of the cons?
Yeah, so I think the pro is Microsoft's huge, right? Yeah. So they've got a lot of experience. Right. So they kind of have a very standard way of organizing their data and exposing these APIs. So in general, I'd say their API documentation is good, but specifically with this project, I think the documentation was a little bit lacking. Okay. There just a few difficulties there where we were trying to understand what this program was doing. Right. It didn't tell us. So, at least we have a connection with Microsoft so that we could actually chat to the people who are actually developing this, which is great. I think that was indispensable.
Absolutely.
Having that connection to actually speak to a developer on their side who understands what this data looks like and what this system is trying to do. So.
That's right. Yeah. And I guess when we coming into that that kind of environment, and you wanted to take on something as big as integrating with one of these guys, you really want to be part of the Microsoft Insiders program. It's great to start on the outside, but you really want to jump in straight and put up your hand and make enough noise that you're able to integrate with them, so that you can have that conversation. How is this working? We're noticing this. Take this feedback.
Definitely.
It just really speeds it up.
Yeah, I think it was the system that they have, that marketplace system that they have at the moment is it was, I think, quite early in development. Right. Even though they were pushing people to move into it. Right. So it didn't have the polish that a lot of the Microsoft ecosystem has, and kind of what we expect. Right. But at the same time, whenever we raise some of these concerns, a month or two later, they would update. Exactly. Yeah, they just have push a small update silently or whatever, and it just it was the feedback that you gave to them that they've implemented, and I think that's great.
Feels great, right?
Yeah, a tiny little SA company.
Yeah, feels good.
Just giving feedback to them, and then them actually taking that feedback and taking it seriously. I think is great. So.
Amazing. I think it shows the culture that exists at Microsoft. I can't talk for all the technology partners, but certainly at Microsoft, they really live that out. Trying to empower everyone on the planet. Going down the other rabbit hole, if I can, you're kind of working with other systems who are trying to get onto marketplace, and therefore you're seeing some of the tech stack that they're using. We're certainly not going to call any of them out. But just what is some of the challenges that you're seeing in wanting to adopt and be part of a new modern ecosystem of applications, but your application itself is not quite ready for that? I even reflect back in where would OneView be if we weren't in cloud and we stayed in our data center? Would we really be able to take advantage like we are now of something like the Azure Marketplace? And I don't think so. Maybe reflect on that, or an example that you've seen, where it's been easy, or where it's maybe been a challenge that someone needing to overcome some hurdles.
Yeah, I think just because of the nature of what we've been doing here, cloud is easy for us, right? Like we just have so much practice with it. And the expectations that have been set on a product, essentially, cloud solves a lot of those problems. Right. But then, like some of our clients, they might not necessarily have that experience working with cloud, or we say, you need to do this because Microsoft says you need to do this. Right. And they're not as on board as we have been, or as we expect them to be, essentially. So these people are taking giant leaps in order to get their apps in marketplace, software as a service, things like that. And it's not always easy, as easy as clicking a button or integrating with a solution. You kind of do need to still understand what is happening in the cloud.
Right. So a couple of quick fire questions to end us off. The first one, an easy one, Azure or AWS?
Oh, Azure, all day, every day.
What's your favorite Azure service, your Azure resource?
I think Function Apps.
Function.
They're so useful, yeah.
Another one, GitHub or Azure DevOps?
I'd say GitHub. I think it's a bit friendlier, even though Azure DevOps is a competent Git solution.
Perfect. And then last but not least, Angular or Blazor?
I'd say Angular. I think it's a bit more mature than Blazor at the moment.
Makes sense. Okay. Thank you very much, Michael. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.